Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They came for my bridge while I was gone, ripped it from the earth like it never mattered, but it did. It was my lifeline, my legacy, my line in the sand. Now they want to erase my land from the map. Let them try. They just declared war on the wrong damn man. The morning air in the mountains always has a bite to it, even in spring. I stepped out onto my porch with a mug of black coffee in one hand and my dog Samson trotting beside me. From the porch, I could see the old concrete bridge my grandfather built back in the early 70s, 50 years of holding strong over the river that split my land from the municipal road. It wasn't pretty, but it was solid. Reinforced concrete, embedded rebar, poured and cured the right way, back when folks still built things to last. The bridge is the only road in or out of my land. 120 acres of pure Idaho mountain terrain, forest, ridgelines, a creek-fed pond, and the house I rebuilt with my own hands after retiring from military engineering. This place wasn't just my home, it was my perimeter. My late wife and I had planned to live out our years here. Now it was just me and Samson, and I guarded it like it still mattered to someone else. That morning, Samson started barking toward the riverbank. I looked past the trees and spotted something odd. 3 people in neon vests walking around near the base of the bridge. One of them held a clipboard, another had a tablet and was taking pictures. All of them were definitely not from around here. I walked down the slope, keeping my posture calm but deliberate. As I got closer, they noticed me. The tallest, a thin man with sunglasses and a corporate haircut, stepped forward. "Morning," he said, tight smile, too polished. "Just doing a safety assessment." "Of what?" I asked, not slowing down. "This is private property." He held up his badge on a lanyard. "Derek Langford, infrastructure consultant. We're surveying potential risks to neighboring developments." "Nothing invasive," Samson growled low. I gave a slight hand signal and he stopped. "You're standing 10 feet inside my property line. That bridge is mine. Been mine since the day I inherited this place." Derek smiled again, wider this time but just as fake. "Understood. We're working with Silver Pines Estates HOA. They're just across the river, as I'm sure you know. They asked us to review access infrastructure in the area. You know, for public safety." "Public safety has nothing to do with that bridge," I said. "It's privately maintained." "Not your concern." He exchanged a glance with the woman holding the tablet. "We'll make note of that. But you might want to consider an independent inspection. That structure's aged." I leaned in a little closer. "It's aged better than most marriages, and unlike HOA nonsense, it's legally sound." He nodded quickly, trying to maintain control. "Of course. Have a nice day." I stood there until they packed up and hiked back to their SUV, which was parked awkwardly on the side of the municipal road. When I got back to the house, I pulled up the property survey file from my safe. My land stopped exactly at the river. The bridge and both banks were mine. No easement, no right-of-way, just good old-fashioned inheritance. 2 days later, she came. I was repairing one of the trail cameras near the lower ridgeline when a sleek black Lexus pulled up at the top of the gravel drive. Out stepped a woman in her late 50s with platinum blonde hair, white heels that made no sense in the mountains, and a folder under her arm. She looked like she was ready for a real estate pitch, not a confrontation. "Mr. Drayden?" she called out. I straightened up, wiped my hands, and walked over. "That's me. I'm Karen Winslow, president of the Silver Pines Estates Homeowners Association." She said it like she was introducing royalty. "I believe there's a matter we need to discuss." I didn't say a word, just stared and waited. She opened the folder and handed me a glossy document with an HOA seal stamped at the top. "We've conducted a review and determined that the structure you refer to as a bridge presents a significant hazard. It obstructs safe access for emergency services and may pose a collapse risk. We're formally requesting its removal within 30 days. I looked at her like she'd handed me a paper menu for a restaurant I'd just burned down. "You think you get to tell me what to do with my bridge?" I asked. She smiled, tight, rehearsed, smug. "It's not about authority, it's about responsibility. Our residents use that area frequently. Any threat to their safety." "Your residents can use their own road," I cut her off. "That bridge sits on my land, built by my family, maintained by me. Your HOA has no jurisdiction here." She kept smiling. "We'll see about that. I just wanted to offer a neighborly warning. Ignoring this could have consequences." She turned back to her car like she'd just won something. I didn't move, just stood there and watched the dust kick up as her Lexus rolled back onto the pavement. When it settled, the bridge looked the same as always, steady, silent, strong. But I knew better. This wasn't over. It started with silence, not the peaceful kind I was used to. No bird song, no wind cutting through the pines, just a dead, heavy stillness that hit me the moment I turned off the ignition and stepped out of the truck. Something was wrong, and I felt it before I saw it. I'd been gone for less than 48 hours, drove into town to restock propane, pick up antibiotics for Samson's paw infection, and grab supplies from the feed store. I don't leave often, but when I do, I lock down the place tight. That bridge has never been much of a security risk. Only one road in, and neighbors a mile away at minimum. Or so I thought. When I rounded the last bend in the road, my headlights fell on the riverbank and stopped cold. Where my bridge had stood for 50 years, there was now a gaping void. Broken concrete chunks lay scattered across the embankment, some partially submerged in the rushing water. Twisted rebar stuck up like snapped ribs. There was no mistake. It wasn't weather, it wasn't age. Someone had torn the damn thing down. I got out, slammed the truck door, and sprinted to the edge. The devastation was surgical. Whoever did this used industrial equipment. You don't punch through reinforced concrete like that with a sledgehammer and a grudge. This was planned. I dropped to a knee and scanned the mud. Tracks, deep, wide tire grooves, multiple vehicles, at least one excavator, maybe two. Footprints, too. Then I saw something glinting, half buried near the tree line. I pulled it out, a yellow zip tie with the logo of Red Ridge Contracting, a regional construction firm. I knew them. They handled big municipal jobs, roads, flood channels, industrial drainage. No way they just wandered over here. Someone paid them. Samson limped up beside me, sniffed the mud, and let out a soft growl. I scratched behind his ear. Yeah, bud, I don't like it either. With the bridge gone, there was no way to get the truck home. I loaded what I could into my pack, slung the rest over my shoulder, and started the cold wade through the river. It was thigh-deep, fast, and nearly swept me off twice. By the time I climbed the far bank, I was soaked, shivering, and furious. The house was untouched, no signs of intrusion, but I was now marooned on my own damn land. I spent the night documenting everything. Drone footage, trail cam logs, photos of the damage from every angle. I sent it all to Jim Harris, my old CO from the Army Corps of Engineers, who now worked for the Idaho Division of Transportation. He was the closest thing I had to an expert who would give a damn. At dawn, I hiked up the ridge with my portable antenna and finally got a signal strong enough to place a call to the sheriff's department. The dispatcher sounded skeptical until I told her there was evidence of trespass, illegal demolition, and that I had reason to believe a homeowners association was behind it. You're saying they demolished your bridge without a permit? I'm saying they sent a damn crew onto private property to destroy critical infrastructure without a warrant, notice, or even knocking on the front door. And I've got proof. She promised to send someone. A deputy showed up 5 hours later, on foot, wearing waders and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He surveyed the mess with a notepad, squinting at the rebar and the tracks. You sure this wasn't just a collapse? I handed him the contractor tag and a still frame from the drone video showing a backhoe parked near the bridge the night before I left. He went quiet. That's damning, he admitted. But I'll have to kick this up the chain. This is county, possibly state. You said you suspect the Silver Pines HOA. I nodded. 2 days before it happened, their president was on my land threatening legal action. Told me I'd regret keeping the bridge. He scribbled more notes. I'll file the report, but it'll take time, and I can't get a team out here without a bridge. No shit, I muttered. That night, I reviewed the trail cam footage frame by frame. On the second camera near the tree line, a low-res image showed a flatbed truck crossing the bridge at 2 a.m., loaded with machinery. The timestamp matched perfectly with the day I was out of town. They waited for me to leave. They knew what they were doing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk with the generator humming and the monitors glowing. Samson slept at my feet, and I made a list. Names, times, photos. This wasn't going to end in angry letters or polite phone calls. They'd made it personal. The certified envelope came 2 days after I filed the incident report with the sheriff's office and sent Jim the full drone data. I'd expected another demand letter, maybe a veiled threat wrapped in HOA letterhead. What I didn't expect was a summons. Inside the envelope was a formal civil complaint, Silver Pines Estates Homeowners Association v. Matthew Drayden. The accusations were as ridiculous as they were enraging. According to their lawsuit, my illegally constructed bridge posed an imminent danger to adjacent residential development, and its removal had been necessitated in the interest of public safety. The complaint stated I had willfully obstructed access for emergency services and failed to comply with regional infrastructure standards. It demanded reimbursement for the demolition costs, $60,000, plus legal fees. $60,000 for destroying my own damn bridge. I laughed. Then I stopped laughing because it wasn't a joke. It was a full-blown legal assault. I drove into town the next day, took a ferry route from the stateside, and went straight to my attorney, Kayla Thorne. She was sharp, ex-DEA, and specialized in land use law. I laid the packet down on her desk and said one word: war. She read the complaint silently, her brow furrowed halfway through. "They're trying to get ahead of liability," she muttered. "Spin the narrative. You're the threat. They're the victims. You sure it was the HOA that sent in the crew?" I handed her the contractor tag, the trail cam printouts, and a video clip showing the backhoe crossing the bridge with a timestamp and GPS overlay. Then I dropped the bomb, a copy of the internal HOA memo I'd received by mistake, an email with a partial thread referencing coordinated structural clearance and quiet removal procedures sent by their board secretary. Kayla blinked, then smiled. "Oh, this is going to be fun." She filed a counterclaim the next morning. Unlawful destruction of private infrastructure, trespassing, unauthorized use of heavy machinery, intentional infliction of hardship. We also requested a temporary injunction against any further contact from HOA agents or representatives and submitted a motion to compel their board to turn over all internal communications related to the bridge. That same afternoon, I met Jim Harris at a local diner just off the interstate. He handed me a folder thicker than a phone book. "Dot records, historical zoning overlays, and certified documentation from your grandfather's original county filing," he said. "That bridge was legally registered and grandfathered into local easement law. No one, not the HOA, not the county, not the damn governor, has the right to touch it without your consent or court order," which they didn't get. I thanked him and paid for his coffee. Then I drove straight to the county recorder's office and had a certified copy made of every document. By the end of the week, HOA was served with our suit. Their lawyer, a slick kid in a custom-tailored suit and 1,000-yard stare, filed a motion to dismiss. Kayla barely let the ink dry before filing our response with attachments that made their case look like a late-night fever dream. I figured they'd double down, and they did. The day after we filed our counterclaim, someone spray-painted "Public Menace" in red block letters across my mailbox. A few fence posts near the lower pasture were knocked down. I reported it. Sheriff's Department took note, but no action. No clear suspects, they said. So I made it real clear. I mounted motion sensor lights, infrared trail cams, and signs along the boundary line that read, "Trespassers will be prosecuted." Meanwhile, HOA board members were leaking information. Turns out, a few residents in Silver Pines weren't thrilled with Karen Winslow's little crusade. One of them, retired state fire marshal, reached out anonymously and said he'd seen the initial vote regarding the bridge issue. It hadn't passed. Karen had moved forward anyway, unilaterally. No HOA-wide approval, no oversight. Kayla lit up when I told her. "That makes it not just civil trespass," she said. "That makes it rogue governance, and possibly fraud." I sat back, hands clasped, adrenaline steadying. They thought they were being smart, getting rid of a bridge they didn't control. Now they were standing on legal quicksand. I'd spent the better part of the past decade being neighborly, even to people who didn't deserve it. About 8 years back, one of the previous board members from Silver Pines asked if they could use a narrow gravel path that cut across the far southern edge of my property. It wasn't much, just an old forestry maintenance road that bordered the creek and connected to their fire road. I didn't use it, and frankly didn't care. I said yes, verbal only, no paperwork, just a handshake and a "don't be stupid about it." Well, that favor ended the moment they destroyed my bridge. On the second Friday after the lawsuits were filed, I got an early morning call from a Silver Pines resident. Not HOA, not a board member, just a regular guy named Charlie Rowe. someone I'd met at the hardware store a few times. "Hey, Matt," he said cautiously, "you might want to check out the neighborhood Facebook page. There's talk that the HOA is planning to use the South Path permanently for emergency access, something about filing a right-of-use petition with the county." I nearly dropped my coffee. "They want to make that road permanent?" "Without asking me." "Yeah," Charlie said, "and rumor is they're telling folks you verbally approved it indefinitely." I thanked him and hung up. Within 10 minutes, I was in my truck with bolt cutters, steel poles, and a case of not today attitude. By noon, I had installed 2 retractable steel gates on either end of the southern path, backed by cross-post fencing and enough surveillance coverage to make Fort Knox blush. The signs were clear: private property, no public access. Trespassing will be prosecuted. And just to be crystal clear, I backed it up with a cease and desist letter, hand-delivered by Kayla to the HOA office. In it, we formally revoked all historical informal permissions and made it explicitly illegal for anyone to set foot on that path without written consent. The fallout was immediate. 3 days later, I had a county deputy at my gate, politely asking if I could consider reopening the road for safety reasons. I asked him if the county had ever paid to maintain it. They hadn't. I asked if the county held an easement. They didn't. Then I asked if Karen Winslow had been the one to send him. He gave me a tired look and left with a shrug. The next morning, a piece ran in the local paper titled "Rural Dispute Blocks Emergency Access for Dozens of Families." They quoted Karen, of course. She claimed my sudden aggression had endangered hundreds of residents by cutting off the only viable fire evacuation route. She even implied I had done it in retaliation for reasonable safety concerns. That was cute, considering they'd jackhammered my only bridge off the map. Jim reached out the same day. They filed a petition to the county commissioner, he said, claim they have an implied easement based on years of use. They have nothing in writing, I said. That path was a courtesy. Courtesy's dead. He chuckled. Yeah, I told them the same thing in more bureaucratic language. The residents of Silver Pines weren't happy. The HOA board scheduled a meeting open to the neighborhood, and by sheer luck or stupidity, they sent an open invitation to the press. Kayla and I decided to attend. Not quietly. We walked in mid-speech. Karen was already in full performative mode, gesturing dramatically at a slideshow featuring pictures of the destroyed bridge, the locked gates, and, my favorite, a heavily edited photo of me holding a shotgun near a sign that said, "Trespassers will be shot." The original sign read, "Will be prosecuted." The shotgun was photoshopped. I've never even owned that model. She paused mid-sentence when we entered. I raised a hand. "Karen," I said evenly, "you forgot to mention that you had my bridge demolished without legal authority and are now trying to seize a road that doesn't belong to you." The crowd stirred. Some gasped. Others leaned forward. Kayla took out a folder and handed it to a local reporter in the front row. "These are certified records of ownership, the legal status of the bridge, trail cam footage, and contractor tags from the demolition. The full set of evidence will be made available to the court." Karen froze. One older woman in the crowd stood up and said, "Wait, are you saying you didn't get a permit to remove that bridge?" Karen ignored her. Another voice, this time from a man near the back, asked, "Did the board even vote on it?" Karen waved them off. "This isn't the place." Kayla raised her voice. "It absolutely is. You trespassed, destroyed private infrastructure, and now want to claim victimhood. Your access roads are your problem, mister." Drayden is under no legal obligation to provide infrastructure to anyone, especially the people who just tried to sue him into the ground. By the end of that meeting, half the room had turned on her. The local paper ran a follow-up titled "HOA President Faces Backlash After Illegal Bridge Demolition Revealed." But the real win came 2 days later when I got a notice from the county fire chief himself. Due to limited egress from Silver Pines and no clear emergency routes, the county had suspended further development approvals for their subdivision until the issue was resolved. Their expansion plans, dead in the water. I didn't plan to rebuild the bridge right away. Truth be told, I'd considered leaving it as a cratered reminder of what happens when you screw with the wrong man's land. But a few things changed my mind. First, Kayla advised me to move fast. Rebuilding would show the court I was mitigating damages, something juries like to see. Second, the locals were starting to grumble about the inconvenience of me being stranded. Not because they cared, but because they realized if I couldn't get in and out easily, neither could fire, police, or anyone delivering subpoenas. Lastly, and maybe most satisfying of all, I wanted to control the only point of access again, on my terms, so I started making calls. I hired a crew from a neighboring county, not local, not connected to HOA contracts, and not the kind of guys who asked many questions. I paid them double to work fast and triple to keep their mouths shut. Within 4 days, they had a temporary service bridge across the river, just wide enough for my truck, reinforced with steel I-beams and gravel-packed decking. It wasn't pretty, but it was solid. While they worked, I mapped out the permanent structure. The new bridge wouldn't just be a replacement, it would be a message. I designed it with 2 retractable steel gates, one on each end, operated remotely. Infrared cameras mounted to both entry points, motion-triggered floodlights, and under the decking, a redundant pressure sensor that could detect a vehicle over 2,000 pounds. If someone so much as rolled a golf cart over it without my authorization, I'd get an alert and a thermal image within 30 seconds. Jim reviewed the plans and whistled. "You building a bridge or a military checkpoint?" "Same thing where I come from," I replied. While construction continued, I got word from one of my contacts inside the Department of Lands. Apparently, HOA had filed a formal complaint with the county zoning board, claiming my new structure would obstruct watershed flow and public access to riverfront areas. Kayla handled the hearing like a prize fighter. "You already demolished his infrastructure without a court order," she told the board. "Now you're claiming the replacement is a problem? The man is fixing what your clients destroyed." HOA's lawyer tried to argue that the riverfront should be shared access for community benefit. That's when I pulled out the ace. See, during the cleanup from the old bridge demolition, one of the workers had handed me a torn plastic folder he found buried near the rubble. Inside was a partially waterlogged packet, email printouts, memos, and one very interesting scanned map. The map had my property line redrawn, faintly but clearly. The original county survey had been altered to show the bridge and a 10-foot strip on either side as falling within Silver Pine's buffer zone. It was dated 6 months before the demolition. I'd kept it quiet, but now it was time. At the zoning board hearing, I walked to the front of the room, held up the page, and asked one question. Can someone explain why the Silver Pines HOA had this doctored map in their possession? The room went silent. One of the county officials took the paper, squinted, and his eyes widened. "This isn't a valid GIS overlay," he muttered. "No," I said, "it's not." But someone tried to use it to justify demolishing a bridge they never owned. Within 48 hours, the county referred the map to the state attorney's office for investigation. I didn't need to be told that things were about to get very, very serious for Karen Winslow. Back on my land, the new bridge was almost complete. The last load of steel was lowered into place with a crane I paid for myself. We poured the concrete apron, sealed the decking, and mounted the final gate control system. I stood there at dusk, watching the floodlights kick on and the system arm itself with a soft mechanical hum. This time, if someone tried to trespass, they wouldn't just be caught. They'd be caught on camera, cataloged, and broadcasted in high definition to 3 separate backup servers. Let them try again. Let them step foot on my side of the river. This time, I'd be ready. The arrest didn't happen in some dramatic raid at dawn or with agents rappelling from black helicopters. It happened at 2:30 on a Thursday afternoon while Karen Winslow was sipping a decaf almond milk latte in the cafe just outside the Silver Pines community gates, dressed in a cream blazer and holding court with 2 junior board members like she was the queen of HOA Babylon. I wasn't there, but I heard about it in exquisite detail. 2 county deputies, accompanied by an investigator from the state attorney general's office, walked right up to her table. No raised voices, no hand on a gun. Just a quiet, "Ma'am, you're under arrest for felony forgery, criminal mischief, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud." She dropped her latte. Then she dropped her composure. The mugshot hit the local news within hours. Her face looked pinched, dazed, still trying to calculate how it had come to this. But I knew exactly how. It started with that fake map, confirmed by GIS experts to be altered using software only accessible through municipal or engineering channels. Then came the contractor's sworn statements. The HOA had contacted them directly, providing a falsified easement diagram and authorization letter that bore the digital signature of a county safety officer who, upon review, had never signed anything. And then came the good part. Email chains recovered from Karen's HOA account during a subpoena-driven forensic audit. The emails were gold. One message dated 3 weeks before the bridge demolition read, "We need to move forward on the removal. The board is dragging its feet. If we let this guy stall us out, we'll never gain control of the riverfront. Let me handle it." Another one, sent to a developer with pending plans for a cluster of luxury cabins, stated, "Once the old man's bridge is gone, we'll file a usage claim on the access corridor. I'll fast-track the approval once we have the shoreline under management." They didn't just destroy a bridge, they were trying to steal land. The fallout was swift. Karen was hit with 6 charges, 2 counts of forgery, 1 count of conspiracy to defraud, 1 count of criminal damage to property, and 2 counts of abuse of authority under state HOA statutes. Her vice president, Brent Mason, was arrested the next day for aiding and abetting, as well as signing off on a payment disbursement without board approval. A third board member, Janine Teller, turned state's witness in exchange for immunity. Her testimony confirmed what we already knew, that Karen had bullied the board into submission and threatened anyone who questioned her strategy. The community of Silver Pines went into freefall. Half the residents were livid, the other half terrified. Meetings were canceled, lawyers were called. The HOA's bank account was frozen by court order. Kayla filed a motion to include Silver Pines Estates as a named co-defendant in our civil suit, citing gross negligence and systemic abuse of governance. In the meantime, the state launched a separate review of the HOA's incorporation documents. Turns out, some of the filings had inconsistencies. One subdivision was improperly annexed. Fees were misallocated. A quarter of their voting base was technically disenfranchised. It was bureaucratic collapse, and I had a front row seat. A week after the arrest, I stood on the rebuilt bridge as a forensic engineer team arrived to inspect what was left of the old foundation. One of them, a woman from Boise, squatted near the edge and whistled through her teeth. "You know," she said, "this wasn't just careless. This was surgical. They knew what they were doing. Somebody gave that crew detailed specs." I nodded. Karen always liked things done with precision. She shook her head. "She's done now." Back at the house, I updated my records. I documented everything, every photo, every receipt, every signature and timestamp, because there was still a trial coming. And I didn't want to just win. I wanted it on the record. I wanted it to be public, because the next time an HOA tried to muscle someone like me off their land, I wanted them to remember what happened the last time. The courthouse in Boise was an older federal building with polished marble floors, brass handrails, and that faint scent of mildew and government paper. It was the kind of place where you could hear a pen drop and where the air seemed charged with anticipation, especially the morning our case went to trial. It had taken months to get to this point. Depositions, motions, subpoenas, hearings. Karen's high-priced legal team tried everything. Dismissals, venue changes, suppression attempts. None of it worked. The judge, a weathered man named Harold Connors, wasn't buying any of it. I could tell by the way he looked over his glasses at them during the pretrial conferences, like a man tired of being lied to by amateurs in expensive suits. The first day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Media, residents from Silver Pines, a few local officials, even a reporter from a national outlet showed up, sniffing around for a juicy HOA Gone Rogue headline. Kayla opened with precision. Photographs of the destroyed bridge, trail cam footage of the heavy equipment, receipts from Red Ridge Contracting, the timeline of my documented ownership, and the infamous altered map. She didn't just build a case. She constructed a fortress. Then came the emails. The jury's eyes widened as Kayla read aloud the messages Karen had sent to her board and the developer. Hearing them in her smug, typed-out words was even more damning than the printed evidence. The prosecution in the criminal case took over midweek. They brought in expert witnesses, county surveyors, GIS specialists, forensic auditors. Each one testified that the bridge had been on my land, that the map had been digitally manipulated, and that the HOA had no legal jurisdiction over my property. Red Ridge's foreman took the stand and admitted, under oath, that they'd been hired by Karen directly, paid through a discretionary fund the board never approved, and shown what they assumed were valid legal documents, now known to be fraudulent. When it was time for me to testify, I didn't rehearse. I sat in that witness box and told the truth. I spoke about the history of the bridge, how my grandfather poured that concrete with his own hands. I talked about how I'd maintained it for years, How I'd been threatened, then cut off from my own home. How I'd waded through a freezing river with a rifle slung over my back and groceries on my shoulders because some self-important HOA president decided I was inconvenient. I looked the jury in the eye. I served overseas, I said. I've seen governments fall apart. But I never expected to come home to Idaho and watch a private group of neighbors with no authority demolish my infrastructure, then sue me for trying to survive it. Karen didn't testify. Her lawyers probably thought it was safer to keep her quiet. But it didn't matter. Her silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. In closing arguments, Kayla reminded the jury that this wasn't just about a bridge. It was about property rights, about abuse of power, and about the dangerous precedent that would be set if people like Karen Winslow weren't held accountable. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. They found in our favor on every count: civil damages for destruction of property, trespassing, emotional distress, and fraud. The awarded damages totaled $780,000, enough to rebuild the bridge twice over, cover legal costs, and buy a billboard if I felt like it. Then came the criminal verdict. Karen was sentenced to 12 years in prison with parole eligibility after 7. Her vice president, Brent Mason, received 6 years. The judge was brutal in his sentencing. "You weaponized governance," he told Karen. "You used a position of local authority to pursue a personal agenda, endangered a man's safety, destroyed his access to basic services, and falsified public records. You treated someone else's land like it was a sandbox for your ambitions. You will pay for that." And then, just like that, it was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Kayla handled most of it. I gave a short statement. "I didn't fight this hard for revenge," I said. "I fought because I don't want any other homeowner to go through what I did. This isn't about winning. It's about drawing a line. And this time, the line would hold." I crossed the new bridge at sunrise, the gates rolling open with a smooth mechanical hum and clicking shut behind me like the teeth of a steel trap. The frost was still on the grass, the pine tops glowing gold from the early light. Samson trotted beside the truck, tongue out, tail high. He always liked patrols in the morning. A year ago, this land had nearly been taken from me, piece by piece, not with guns or bulldozers, but with paperwork and lies. Now the bridge stood stronger than ever, 2 feet wider than the old one, twice as reinforced, with a control system designed by a guy who used to secure forward operating bases in Kandahar. "You want access now? You call me first, or you don't cross." A week after the sentencing, I'd received a letter from the Idaho Department of Transportation, officially certifying the bridge as meeting all structural, environmental, and regional compliance standards. Jim had signed it personally. Beneath that letter was a note scribbled in his handwriting. "It's now the safest piece of concrete in the county." With the verdict handed down and the checks cut, the civil settlement had finally hit my account. Most of it I set aside for the property trust, repairs, equipment, future litigation if needed. But some of it I used to finish what the HOA had started, eliminating every last tendril of their influence from my borders. The South Road, where they used to sneak through, fenced, monitored, motion-triggered alarms with live feed backups. I posted 2 new signs at the gate: private property, no trespassing, no easements, no HOA. The HOA itself, gone. Dissolved by order of the court after a formal review found chronic governance failure and systemic misuse of authority. Their funds were liquidated and reallocated to a municipal oversight board. The properties within Silver Pines were still standing, but now they were under county jurisdiction, without an association, without dues, and without Karen's army of clipboard tyrants. The irony? Property values went up. Residents started organizing voluntary neighborhood events, helped elderly neighbors maintain their homes, and, get this, even asked me to host a community Q&A on landowner rights and private easements. I declined politely. I'm not a preacher, just a man who built a fence and finally enforced it. But I did agree to one thing. On the 4th of July, I hosted a barbecue. Open invite. Nothing fancy, just burgers, corn, a few dogs running wild in the meadow. People from town showed up. A few folks from Silver Pines, too. Charlie Rowe came by with his wife, brought a homemade pie. Looked like he wanted to say something, but never quite got it out. Around sunset, as folks were heading home, a kid from the neighborhood walked up and asked me what the giant white letters on my gate meant. He pointed at the new metal sign I'd welded myself and bolted into reinforced concrete. I followed his gaze and read it out loud. Private property. Trespassers will face federal charges. He frowned. Is that legal? I smiled. Now it is. That night, I sat out on the porch with Samson, a cold beer in hand, and watched the floodlights flick on over the bridge. The wind carried the faint scent of mesquite and pine. No sirens, no shouting, no HOA, just silence, just mine.